check, or do we just know once this is?
Why?
Look at that.
I'm not muted. We have. Okay.
Well, fantastic. Thanks for everybody for joining us. It is 11 o'clock. We are going to call this Water and Sewer Committee meeting to order. And we have one item, and that was the floodplain compliance projects that Eric had mentioned in a letter to council. It was at 2 meetings ago. And I will turn it over to you guys to. I want you to go upstairs.
Well, thank you for joining us. This CAP is nothing new. We've been talking about it for some time. And due to scheduling and uncertainty at different levels of government, with FEMA, it's been kind of a challenge to get people around, but they've been cooperative. Eric's worked very diligently with our representative to get to where we are. So a quick recap. We had phase one which was when the surveyor went around and did the elevation certificates for the identified properties, and they gave recommendations on what FEMA needed. We needed to be compliant with FEMA to maintain the flood insurance program that we are in for the city. So that is the key trigger for this, to make sure we're compliant.
Real quick,
Yes, sir.
the flood insurance program that we are in for the city, that's citizens of Findlay, and that's the FEMA mandated off flood insurance.
Correct. You're in the floodplain. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're in the floodplain, identified property, and you have a loan through a bank. You're required to have flood insurance. So us being eligible for this program is essential for the residents that are in that area. If we are not compliant and FEMA says you're not eligible for this flood insurance plan, then this will directly impact individuals that have to have loans through banks that have criteria.
I wanted to make sure that the clarification that when you said we, it was we, the citizens, not we, simply the city, the municipal organization.
And
Correct.
just for my own, so if you own your house outright, you're not required to,
Pay cash is not an issue.
that you don't have to have flood insurance.
Just anybody that has a loss.
Just take a risk.
Yeah. You might need to, and you could still get, private market flood insurance. However, it's going to be much more expensive.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you for that clarity. So with that, the elevation certificates were complete, and there were homes that were identified. We're at the point where we want to go into phase two, which is actually addressing the flood vents in these identified properties. To be clear, they're all residential. There are no commercial properties that we are addressing, and they've been identified. Eric's going to go into some of the detail of it. And then when we're done with that phase, as we move forward, we'll come back and address phase three, which will be there's 4 properties, residential properties that are identified that have crawl spaces that are not at the elevation that have been identified through those elevation certificates. So what's that mean? There's 4 residents that have crawl spaces that have to be raised with stone. So you get an auger and you backfill into the crawl space and raise it to the level that's been identified. That's down the road. Let's just chunk this off one phase at a time. And today is the vents. So you want to talk through the details of the numbers and so forth?
Yeah, so whenever we met with FEMA back in 2022, they identified 34 properties that were still in limbo from a prior visit back in 2011. So we were working due diligently through those, and I determined during our conversations and reading their document that they gave us that we had 20 properties that had physical issues with them, whether it was vents, fill, whatnot. So those 20 properties was part of phase one that we got elevation certificates for, which is performed by a professional surveyor. That was to determine whether or not their findings were actually correct. They came back. 4 of them I was able to send back to FEMA and say, hey, we want to try to get these removed from the CAD visit. The other ones, there was 9 with vents that had to be done, and then 4 that Rob mentioned that had filled that needed to be done. In the meantime, over the past couple of weeks, we got 2 of those back. Said there were other issues that still need to be taken care of. 2 of them had vent issues and 1 more had fill issues. So that brings us to now.
So 11.
So there's 11 total properties, 53 total vents, so it's like 4.5 per property. The issue with vents, a lot of these,
What is a vent?
a vent is, so whenever the water is going up, the vents help the water flow through the property without damaging the foundation,
Inflow and outflow.
inflow and outflow. Yeah.
Okay. Does it go in and out the same pipe or is it
It's true.
go through? It's like a
It's
check.
literally
Okay.
just a band in the wall.
Yes.
Water still.
Right, instead of creating a dam with the foundation going around it or creating that pressure on it, it's going through it. And it's reducing the hydraulic impact.
So with FEMA requirements, it's federal regulation that the properties have to have engineered flood vents. Right now, the properties that were identified, they don't have engineered flood vents, and what those are basically, if a flood happens, you have to go out and you have to slide it so the water can roll through. An engineered flood vent, as soon as it hits, it opens up so it can go straight through the property. The non-engineered flood vents, little technicality, they cover less square footage of the foundation. So in some cases, on elevation certificates, there was 15 flood vents on the property, but it was only covering 400 square feet of area. With the engineered flood vents, they'll cover 200 square foot of area. So there's less needed for that property to have proper venting for the regulations. So that's the space that we're in right now. So go ahead.
One more, a friend of mine has a house that has what I think you would call a non-engineered vent. He
Mhm.
has to physically go open it, or if he was smart, close it in the winter so that his pipes that are right next to the vent won't freeze, and he learned this the hard way. So would a property like that, are you saying that that would have to be retrofitted with engineered vents?
Wouldn't have to be retrofitted, but if it's new development, and in this case, a lot of the permits were issued back in the time. At that time, you have to. So it's engineered flood vent, so that's probably pre NFIP program, which is 1979.
No, actually, probably
something
not.
different.
I think I think his house was raised after one of the floods. It's down there, Emory Adams on the east side of the river in that neighborhood there, and I bet it was physically raised.
So
So I'm wondering
that
if
could
that,
be, so they randomly do compliances and they randomly pull permits. So if they were to pull his and they were to check it, if say it was built raised in 2009, there's a possibility that property could have been in non-compliance.
okay.
So-
But so we
Do they
would,
grandfather?
so we would expect to see, so would we expect to see, do they just randomly check these, or did they go check every
Random.
single one?
I supplied them with the Excel spreadsheet of our permits that we have issued since 2000. And they randomly go through there and say, you want to see this one, want to see this one, kind of like an audit.
Got it, okay.
And
Do they
then
grandfather like this? So if you're not.
if it's pre NFIP program, which is 1979, that's grandfathered. And you can't, I mean, it's retrofit. They're not gonna go back and say, hey, you have a house that was built in 75, we want to see engineered flood vents. Now, the homeowner, it'd be a wise decision to make those updates if they do have a programmed house, help their insurance rates drastically.
Yeah, because if they're not, if he has to go over and open and shut them, then
Yeah.
that means that he as a property owner has to know that he has to do that and go remember to do that.
Yeah.
Or else it doesn't do it.
And then it causes a conveyance shadow around the property
Yeah.
that crush the foundation.
Yeah.
So. You get.
I'm good.
I just really think you're. I wanted to just move on to kind of the numbers aspect of things unless there was more question. So the original appropriation for this project to get it moving in the elevation certificates done was 15,000. And we spent approximately 8,600, I'm sorry, no, 6,500 on those surveying to date. Now with the identified, the quick math is there's 53 vents that need to be installed and they're $90 each per vent. And we have a contractor who's gave us a quote to install those and it's about $208 per. So the vents themselves are about $4,800 and then 11,000 and change to install, total of 16,000. And we have 6,500 that we spent. So I'm asking for the remaining balance of 8,500 to, we're requesting 10,000 to be incorporated to this project so we can get phase 2 move forward.
And we're only doing the ones that they randomly pick. So there are others out there that probably need to have vents put in them also.
Yeah.
But it's up to the home to do that themselves, is that correct?
So it's because we're an active member into the NFIP, it's our duty to make sure that our regulation is correct in the city. So yes, if they were to come back and say, hey, we want to see X, Y, and Z, and one or two of those properties don't have engineered flood vents and they were built after the program started, then we could possibly have to go back and do that as well. So I've been here, I know that flood venting, I'm always, every single one that I've done is engineering.
So will they come in periodically and say, give me another random sample of us?
So theoretically, we want to get this one closed out for 2011.
Okay.
Then they may want to see more properties after that time point from 2025, 2026, whatever the time period is. We'll get a list kind of like we did before and then go back through it and they'll say, okay, you're fully compliant with the National Flood Insurance Program. Now we can start to look at possibly getting into the CRS program. So lower
System.
to lower the rating system, to lower everyone in the city of Findlay's insurance premiums. And the more that we, in that program, the more that we show that we're compliant, the better the discount is. Could be up to 5%, could be up to 10% for policies. Now, let's say we just say, hey, we don't want to do this. Now we're teetering on federal regulation and they can start suspending us and putting us on probation. And that's not good for our citizens. Because now they're looking for private insurance and private insurance is not affordable compared to what the NFI program offers. And then if we start causing, like Rob said, foreclosures and mortgages getting released by the banks.
Yeah, it should not be lost that we're actually at this step. This is a huge success for the city, for the community, that we are to the point where we can be taking these steps and getting closer to a remapping and potentially, saving people this flood insurance burden or lessening. So that is fantastic, and kudos to the community and all who's got us to this point. To me, the ask of 10,000 is well within it. I mean, to me, that I'll say it's a no-brainer. And I'll have some additional questions on that. But one thing I want to make sure that we community-wise want to make sure is that our overall flood mitigation efforts, be that the dry basin, the railroad bridge, the phase 2 benching, that is still this community's, our council, the city of Findlay's number one priority is to fix this flooding issue. And my question to whomever wants to answer, and this is one of the reasons I asked the mayor to be here, is what do we need to do to get this funding thing over the goal line and start working on these 3 key projects. The dry basin, number one, first and foremost, and number 2, in priority that I think is the railroad bridge, and number 3 is the phase 2 benching. Do we as a as a council, as a government, need to start camping out on Congressman Lattis' doorstep, Senators Moreno or Houston. What can we do? Where are we? And is it still this community, this government's community's number one priority to get this thing done? So I'll toss that to.
Yeah, I'll chime in. So first and foremost, yes, it's definitely our number one priority. I would love to say that there's something you could do right now. There's not, except maybe go work at the federal government and just walk in and sign the documents. But that's really where we're at right now. So I am in weekly communication with Congressman Lattis' office, FEMA, Senator Moreno, Senator Houston. I've been meeting with each of them over the last couple of weeks, and I always bring up flood mitigation. It is my understanding, based off of communication from our representative with Jacob Hoover, who is our contact at the state level, who has been doing the weekly calls with FEMA Region 5, who is overseeing our application for the FEMA Flood Hazard Mitigation Grant. They sent some questions to us back on July 11th. We responded on July 14th. And right now we have passed all of the different hurdles required: the cost benefit analysis, the environmental review, the legal review of the FEMA Flood Hazard Mitigation Grant. So right now we are literally waiting for signature.
What kind of questions are they? Just technical stuff?
Yeah, technical stuff, benefit stuff, environmental stuff, just a little bit of everything. Nothing crazy. And we were able to put responses on all of them.
Okay.
So that's moving along well. Same with the Federal Rail Administration grant. Who knows what, other than railroad or a tricky mistress, that is ready for signature as well. As soon as we have that signature, we have a draft contract with Norfolk Southern that is expected to be a construction agreement, expected to be approved in the next couple of weeks by Norfolk Southern Legal.
Those are independent though, right? I mean, you could get the bridge signed and not the.
Correct. Yeah, they're two separate grants.
Two
So we have a
tracks,
federal
and
rail and
they're totally separate.
yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the FEMA Flood Hazard Mitigation Grant and then the Federal Rail Administration. The Federal Rail Administration Grant, again, we're just waiting on signature. We've provided everything we need to them. One of the things, one of the pieces of legislation that you guys approved was necessary for us to show that we had the funding set aside between the city and county and the grant to cover that project. So right now, as soon as we get the Federal Rail Administration grant signature, then we can enter into the construction agreement, and we already have the bid documents all ready to go on all three projects. And then we expect to be able to put those out to bid. We already, Steve Wilson and the Amami Watershed Conservancy District on the basin already had like interested parties, a meeting where they said, hey, we're going to be working on this project. If you're interested in performing the work, come and learn about it. So they already held that in July, I think, or maybe even June.
Yeah, I think it's June.
So they held that. So we really are just waiting for ink on paper. So I sent another email this week to Senator Moreno, Senator Houston, and Bob Lattis, all of their staff members, with the identifying numbers for them to continue to check and push on it. And then because I'm a pastorer, I also sent a text message to the senators and Congressman Latta, also saying, hey, by the way, I've been communicating with your staff on this. As a reminder, we are just waiting on signatures. Please get this done and you can all come to the groundbreaking.
When you say you have conversations with FEMA on a weekly basis, I'm assuming that's phone conversations. Does it help to have Representative Matthews, State Senator McCauley, Congressman Ladd on that call? I mean, because at some point in time, so you're talking a political will question.
I think right now it's a FEMA staffing question. I think we have checked all of the boxes. And now it is working through a federal process. So the meeting that happens on a weekly basis is Jacob Hooper from Ohio EMA, just touching base as the project lead with their counterpart at FEMA. The last couple of weeks, there's been no update. We really are just waiting for signatures at this point because we've answered all of the questions. What we could do is at the next council meeting, we can have a letter from all of you, a resolution of, urging federal government to execute these contracts, recognizing the necessity that every day we wait is another chance for a catastrophic flood event, and another day where the cost is most likely increasing.
Do we do this? Would we do something like that jointly with the county commissioners, and would they be? I don't want you to speak on behalf of them. well,
We could
too
certainly
far.
send,
Yeah, you know, I would rather, if we're doing something like that, I'd rather be it from the city and the county. That we are of one mind. Well, you've definitively said that the city of Findlay's number one priority is flooding. From your interactions with the county commissioners, do you believe that's still their number one priority? Are they partners in this or?
yes, I believe so. I think they are, really supporting Steve Wilson and myself to be the communication,
Okay.
key points. But, Commissioner Basin is false when we can just locally say, hey, what's the status? What do you need, et cetera. So he's well informed. The only thing I would say is that every grant that we've applied for has required a resolution of support from you guys as well as the county commissioners. So that's already documented as part of the application.
Yes,
It really is just, unfortunately, the waiting game of federal government at this point in time. I don't believe there's anything else that we can really do to get it done. Because I was in DC last week and I reached out to the White House contact saying, hey, guys what? I'll be here. Let's sign it. Kind of, facetiously, but just making sure that the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs was also aware of this. And so they're checking in periodically as well.
I think part of my concerns, so I'm bringing this up because I've had conversations with folks in the community who have raised concerns. And I would say one of the concerns simply is that it almost seems like we have lost focus on flooding because we haven't had floods recently. And you don't wish a flood upon anybody or on the community, but it would sure get you, it would get you refocused. And so how do we maintain that necessary level of focus without a flood event? And in conversations, like the only way to do that is to continue to talk about it. And yeah, it sucks talking about waiting for somebody to sign a document so things can happen. I'm just wondering, that's the origin of me bringing this up. I'll say it again, and I know there's not an answer for it, but if there's things that this council can do or the next council can do, we got to get engaged and make this and demonstrate through our actions, which in essence are words, that this is still a priority for this council and for this community. We're talking for the community on this.
I appreciate that. And I think you can just reiterate anytime anybody asks you the question. It is, I'm probably every day nearly following up, checking on something. And I can, at every council meeting say, by the way, we've checked in. There's nothing for us to do at this point in time. Again, I reached out to Senator, I was with Senator Husted earlier this week. I was with Moreno a couple weeks ago and with Latta 2 weeks ago. And every single time I say, we're making progress on flood mitigation, but we need your support in getting these documents signed. Every day we wait is a potential. So I can reiterate that at council meetings if we need to, and I can write an op-ed reminding folks of what we do, but I can assure you, if there was anything that I thought you guys could do, I would ask and make it happen.
No, I like the idea of having a resolution stating what we want and how this thing will benefit us, I think, and get the county on board. I think it's a good thing to do. Wow. Hopefully that helps apply a little pressure, get this moving along. And maybe.
We've only passed about 9 different ordinances that have reiterated that, 3 of them this year. So
Squeaky wheel gets the grease, and I think you gotta keep squeaking. So.
I can tell you every 2-3 weeks, I'm emailing all of their staff, what's the status, what are we going on? So I emailed them again this morning. So we'll keep pushing, and obviously if you guys want to do something, I'm not going to stop you from doing that, but.
Just to echo the mayor, I mean, it might not be outwardly that everyone knows the conversation's going on, but between emails and conversations, majority of things we do, when mayor drives, it centers back to flood mitigation. The efforts it's always talked about what we do here, how do we do this, who do we need to contact, making sure we're on the front end of it.
I think it'd be good for at least monthly at one of the council meetings, every other council, just to remind
everybody the importance, and we're, still pushing. So.
Keep the conversation.
Obviously, there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
I think it just helps the community
Know that we didn't forget.
Well, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that people just don't know about.
And right now, again, you know, there's been tons of stuff over the last couple of years, and right now we literally have done every single thing we could do, and now we're just waiting.
Two more questions, but did they have a contractor interest meeting for the railroad side too?
Not yet, because Norfolk Southern is gonna manage that project.
Is the potential sale of Norfolk or merger of Norfolk and Norfolk Southern with. You guys, are we concerned that that's gonna have a negative effect on this project?
No, the purchase by Union Pacific, we do not believe is going to have any impact because that will not actually happen for a number of years.
Okay.
And we already have, you know, their Norfolk Southern's legal involved in the grant, et cetera. So at this point in time, we have no reason to believe that it will impact.
Has Norfolk and Southern seen the contract
Yes, they've
in
drafted it.
draft?
They drafted it, and
Okay.
now Maumee Watershed Conservancy District, which is the entity that has to execute it, is currently reviewing it. My understanding is they had a couple of questions about indemnification and different things like that they were, I think, going to talk about in the next week or two to work through.
Okay.
But again, that we can't execute, or the Conservancy District can't execute that until they have the Federal Rail Administration grant.
Whatever pushback they have won't get accepted. The railroad's not gonna.
Well, it's,
That's just the way that works.
yeah, it's a little bit of, you know, we'll work through it.
You can try.
Oh, believe me, I've been bashing my head with the railroads for about six and a half years now.
And then ramping that conversation up, and I appreciate it, Mayor, for filling us in on this. I know this is a little bit of a side conversation to the reason this committee's meeting. But back to the fact that we're here because of the progress we've made. And now you have this request. This is success. This is what success looks like in fighting and doing flood mitigation. So Eric, I very much appreciate all the effort you have put in this year. And so the ask is for 10K. I will have no problem making that motion. But it's a side. They randomly sampled properties and identified 11. If I'm a non-randomly selected property and I realize I have the wrong fence, can I get in on this, on this work? And how do we, as a municipality, look at the non-randomly selected properties that have the same issue? And what do we offer this program for them?
And also the people that were identified, do they have to have this done? I mean, somebody could refuse it, or, I
Yeah,
mean, because we're going on to private property, they could say, hey, I don't want you putting fence in my house.
so I've been,
Foolish, but could they do that?
so in my communications with the folks that were identified, it's been positive back and forth. Now, if they would have denied it, there's a clause in the FEMA 480 that is 1316. And that basically
Speak
says, that basically says that the city can begin a process to make sure that that property is not able to get flood insurance if they deny bringing it into compliance. That's never happened since I've been here, and it hasn't happened with the city, but it's always a tool in the tool shed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our thought process, and chime in if this is different the way, as we've discussed this, we feel that even though it would be, you know, wonderful if we were able to go through and identify every single property and just fix it for folks. The reason that we are stepping up to solve the problem for these identified folks is because it has an impact on everyone.
Mhm.
And so that's what really differentiates this. We can, you know, communicate to folks, here's what you should look at. They want to look at self and remediating, but it wouldn't be our recommendation just because to kind of just throw a wide blanket, be willing to step up for everybody because that would be really big can of worms.
I just foresee that can be open. And you're gonna go to this property here. And we are going to install. We're gonna put X number, $1,000 in doing it, and the neighbor has the same situation. They're gonna watch this happen. They're gonna be in front of council and say, where's mine?
Well, because
We just had this, we just look at sidewalks, from Tuesday's conversation. I think I think that's a really a council issue that's gonna have to, and it's obviously it's one of one.
So Eric, it's 10 grand to do the identified, to extend it to all the unidentified non-compliance. Now, what's that number?
I mean, it'd be an unknown number.
Well,
It's unidentified.
We don't know.
it's an unknown.
You're gonna have to look at all the flood sites and stuff that are further.
Door by door, and everyone would have to have elevation certificates done. Everyone.
And again, a part of this also that goes back to the larger flood mitigation is that these are the properties that are impacted that we have to fix to make sure we stay compliant to benefit the entire community. In 2.5, 3 years, when the flood mitigation projects are all complete and we submit the letter of map revision and the entire floodplain changes, there would be properties that if we went out right now and said we had to fix them in 3 years, they may not want to do that. So we could say, hey, after flood mitigation is complete and the redraw happens, then we want to set aside X amount of money to serve as match for properties that self-identify. I think that that's something we
Yeah.
can keep on our radar, but right now I wouldn't recommend trying to go out and figure it out because we don't know what the map's gonna look like in 3 years.
Of course, that makes the humorous thing that one of these properties that we fix, when they redo the maps, might not be on it. We're fixing it so that they don't have to be on it, so we can withdraw that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that also these
Right.
issues should have been resolved probably about 10 years ago. 'Cause they
But we're
were-
also at risk of the reality that FEMA could come in with a new initiative and a new director Monday and say, you have 90 days.
Yeah, so do our crews do this work or do we hire?
We have a contract.
We have a contract.
We have a quote that drove those numbers.
Okay, and once this money is made available, that contractor, well, they've got $7K to start with. They could actually start working immediately. And this money can get there so that they can finish. Are they actively ready to go?
They're winding down concrete season, so I think it's getting close. They just need our blessing.
Who's the contractor?
Paintmeyer.
Okay,
Based on this conversation today, we're prepared to get with them and move forward. We're hoping before the snow flew this, fall, winter, we have this.
so I will motion an additional, and I'm gonna look at you for some words here. An additional 10,000 be allocated, or Rob. Thanks for just being here. Being a pretty face, the less you have to talk, the better. I'm here, I don't want. An additional 10,000 be allocated to,
There's a project name.
Yeah, there's a project name.
This is your big chance.
I don't.
I was gonna say, I get the project number.
What can we call it? The CAV compliance project?
I think we
FEMA.
called it a floodplain. Compliance, it's a project, I can get you, I can go get you a project number.
You could just call it the FEMA
356.
CAV floodplain compliance program or project. That's mouthful.
And then I'll write that in there afterwards. That will be the motion, is that an additional 10,000 be allocated to the floodplain compliance project, and I'll write in the number. I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. Actually, we have a brilliant motion, outstanding second. Would anybody dare speak against this motion? Discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
That it is passed. Seeing as though we have no other business in front of the committee, Oh. In fact, we'll call this meeting to a close.
Very good.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was surprised, Jeremy didn't just have it memorized. He normally has those.